Hello there my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars video. So I want you to cast your minds back to this past summer. Just after Andor Season 2 came to an end, there was a rumour going round that there was some internal drama at Lucasfilm. One side was Dave Filoni, and the other was Tony Gilroy. Now those two showrunners weren't directly at odds, but the rumour stated that Dave Filoni doesn't like how much fans loved the Andor series, especially in light of fan opinions that Ahsoka wasn't as good as Andor. And according to the rumour, which originates with The Ringer's Joanna Robinson, Dave Filoni wasn't happy about it. He didn't like the way fans were bolstering up one series over the other. And at the time this came out, I covered it, and I advised you to take it with a huge grain of salt. Either way, fans were divided on this. There were those who said it's absolute BS, and usually I'd agree with this. Time and again I've tried to dispel the Filoni versus Kathleen Kennedy rumours. The only reported clash that does have some legs to it was the one between Alan Bergman and Kathleen Kennedy, especially when it comes to the information concerning the hunt for Ben Solo. And then there were those on the other hand who said, you know what, there might be something to this. Dave Filoni seems like the kind of guy who's very possessive over his flavour of Star Wars. If you look at everything he's been involved in, it's much more jovial, mythic, symbolic, and I suppose loyal in many ways to George Lucas's view of Star Wars, which always put family first and was accessible to younger viewers. Very different to Andor. Dave's writing is much less serious compared to the adult nature of the Tony Gilroy show. So to that degree, some would argue it is feasible. He prefers the space wizards and the witches and the lightsaber fights, but I also think there's space for Andor to exist, the more adult, gritty and grounded stuff. So why do I bring up this rumour? Because we do have something of an update. While the original rumour was never corroborated, we now know that it might hold more credibility than we initially thought. Because in the last day or so, we've had official confirmation of drama behind the scenes, not concerning Andor, but 2016's Rogue One. And the same source alerted us to this months before the now official confirmation. This is pretty wild. So it's no secret, the 2016 movie, which many fans consider the best of the Disney Star Wars era, did not have a smooth production. From John Knoll's original pitch, to Chris Weitz's rewrites, Gary Whitta coming on board, Gareth Edwards' vision, and then Tony Gilroy stepping in to quote, save the movie, the journey to Rogue One was a chaotic mess. But what if I told you the version of events that is documented was a Lucasfilm PR lie, and there is behind the scenes drama that we'll never know about? One that was so painful that Gary Whitta says, to this day, he'll never work on a Star Wars project ever again, and he can't even enjoy Star Wars anymore. Oh yes, this is not hearsay, those are his own words. He said, quote, I'll never get into the details, but as much as I feel privileged and honoured to have worked on a Star Wars movie, it was also a very, very painful experience for me in many ways, and it's not something that I would ever want to revisit. And almost in unison, Star Wars fans are wondering, well, what in the world did he go through? What is he talking about? Who is he talking about? Is he talking about higher-ups? Is he talking about Disney, Lucasfilm, problems turning in his script, feedback? What was so, quote, very, very painful in his industry as a diehard Star Wars fan that he never wants to return to the franchise ever again. Despite the amazing opportunity, he would never come back to Star Wars. And not just this, an experience so painful that 10 years on, he maintains it ruined his viewing experience as a fan. He can't just turn on the latest Star Wars shows and watch them without thinking, oh my gosh, this is the franchise that ruined my life. So you have to wonder, what else happened behind the scenes? Well, my friends, we have two huge clues. One from Tony Gilroy and one from Gareth Edwards. Tony recently gave some insights into what it was like coming into the process. It was during a time where initial filming was done, principal photography was finished, but Disney and Lucasfilm looked at the movie and they said, this just isn't good enough. So Tony was brought in and he had a very difficult job. He not only had to restructure the entire thing, but he had to write additional scenes, initiating the reshoot phase, brand new scenes, reworked character arcs, and major adjustments to the final act, notably what happens on Scarif. He also helped to supervise and shape those reshoots, and did uncredited directorial work. So Tony really is the saviour of Rogue One. If you're a fan of the movie and you appreciate it, I know we give him a lot of praise for Andor, which is a masterpiece in my opinion, but he single-handedly saved Rogue One. Tony describes it as radical surgery on something that was certainly dead, and whenever Tony talks about Andor, he's got a smile on his face. When he talks about Rogue One, it really comes across like he's describing the most intense and arduous experience of his life. It could not have been a good experience. And so returning back to Joanna Robinson, she recently opened up about the time she interviewed Gareth Edwards, and apparently, and I kid you not, Lucasfilm had to have a babysitter in the room, ensuring Gareth Edwards stuck to his script, said all of the right things, didn't go off topic, didn't reveal too much about the truth of what happened on set and behind the scenes, and ensuring he stuck to the Lucasfilm narrative. And while Gareth has alluded to the challenges of Rogue One, to his credit he's always been very diplomatic. But there was clearly more than he was letting on, and it took until June of this year, so 9 years after the movie released, to learn about the true scale of Rogue One's reshoots. So much was swept under the rug, and it's thanks to Tony Gilroy that we learnt just how much of a mess Rogue One originally was. According to Gilroy, Rogue One was in a much more dire state than we first assumed. When asked about the project, he said, quote, "Rogue One was like, there's a corpse on the table, what are you gonna do? Could someone really come in and save it?" And you know, fair play to him, even though he doesn't go into any explicit detail and he stays very vague. Likening a movie that you worked on to a corpse indicates there was a lot that was going on in the original cut that was a monumental task. And so the fact the movie came out as well as it did, and fans praise it to this day, tells you just how talented Tony Gilroy really is. Not to mention the fact it had a 2-season TV show spin-off that is highly acclaimed. But you would never describe something as a corpse unless things were in a state of absolute devastation. And we already know there were shots that were never used, ones you can still find in the trailers, scrapped concept art, alternate endings, there's a version where Jyn and Cassian survive, but the fact of the matter is, there are secrets and stories that we'll never know about. If you ask the question point blank, what really went wrong with Rogue One's production? No one can give you a black and white answer. There's only conjecture and speculation. No one is just gonna come out with it. But the process ruined people's lives. Just talking about it 10 years on, Gary Whitta's devastated. I reckon Tony Gilroy's the only one who's been the most blunt about it, and I think that's the product of the Andor press tour because there comes a point where you can't talk about Andor without bringing up Rogue One, but describing it like a corpse, he truly did resurrect the movie, and we do know that Tony Gilroy's biggest contribution were the emotional stakes at the end, Rogue One's main characters dying, and there are a couple of reshoots that did save the movie. Many fans argue the Darth Vader hallway scene is the reason Rogue One is such a great film. I think all of the new characters make it great. But yes, the Darth Vader fan service moment was fantastic, because who doesn't want to see Darth Vader kick some ass? And not just this, it felt like the movie was rewarding us, giving us the saga's most iconic character doing what he does best, showing us how terrifying Darth Vader is in the moments leading up to A New Hope. I suppose we'll never know what the original Rogue One would have looked like, but these are some damning words from several creatives, and it certainly makes you rethink some rumours which we assumed must have been false. Share your thoughts in the comments down below, my dear friends. Hope you enjoyed this one, and if you did, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you, always.